Thank you, Abdul Malik, for the opportunity. Thank you, Dr. Salim Barait, for the nice words and appreciation. This is our second course that we're doing, and because of COVID, we've been compelled to do this on a webinar. But in the last 6 months, I think a lot of webinars have been organized, and I think this has really taken a steep, curve of learning for everybody. They can learn convenience of their home. Obviously, this does not replace a workshop. Neurophysiology is all about hands-on experience. And I think once we are out of this COVID era, we will go back to our workshops because I think that is a bit of teaching that I'm missing a lot nowadays. But anyways, we're not going to stop there. We'll not stop our learning processes and we'll continue to do so. And I'm going to start off the first session today, which is on EEG technology. Now, I know there is a whole sort of a spectrum of participants. Some have very good technical backgrounds, and in fact, there are some I know in this audience whom I've learned from, very good, technologists. So this is all about technology. So I'm afraid it may feel a bit dry to people who are more clinically oriented. That's my disclaimer for today. Other than that, I have nothing else to disclose. So when we talk about technology, it's a very important component, and that is like a basic understanding that even clinicians should know. So although I will be going into technical depths, but I will come out and I will be sharing more clinical information, how the technical aspects are relevant to our everyday reading. Just a brief of list of things that we'll be looking at. We'll be looking at different components of the EEG. When we record it, we will be looking at some electrodes, how they function, and what is important things to remember. We will look at a difference amplifier, which is the most important, I think, component of our machine, even if it is an EEG machine or it is an evoked potential recording machine or it's an EMG machine. And then whatever we record, we convert it into digitally and store it. So we cannot do away without the analog digital converter. And while I come to that, I'll speak about some of my SAQ experience. And at the end, we will talk about filters. Sensory speed, I may not touch much about, just mention it without any slides, but this is the whole crux layout today. So I'm gonna be trying to do this in the next 20 to 25 minutes. So please, if I run over time, sort of, somebody can let me know. Anyways, so today's objectives are what is the layout of an EEG machine. So when we look at the patient, we attach the electrodes to the patient. So we look at the electrodes and we look at the function of the electrodes. Then we will look at the head box, which harbors the differential amplifier. And once we have gone through how this differential amplifier works, we will go into to see how our recorded analog signal is converted and digitalized in the ADC, which is the analog digital converter. And after all of these, we put our sort of EEG through different filters. And those filters are the ones that we will spend some time on because they help us read our EEG better. So we have, high frequency filters, low frequency filters, notch filters. And we will also then look at how we store and display this and in our systems. So this is like a layout. And if we know that the head box is a very important region. Now, in some systems, the differential amplifier lives in the head box, or it may be in the computer base unit of the system. Because nowadays, most systems don't have a computer base; they're just laptop-based systems, just running software direct from the head box. So the newer system, most of the differential amplifier are living in the head box. So that's where they live. But sometimes, if you have an older digital system which has sort of a PCs like box comes with it, not the actual PC, but it's just like a plinth box, and that may be harboring a differential amplifier. And so that's mainly the head box. And then the other component, which may be again part of the computer hardware, is in the motherboard, is the small sort of a chip thing, which is what we call the ADC. And so that's the other component. And whatever we look at when we look at the EEG, it's all software. So it's all in our computer or our laptop, wherever we upload it. Okay, so all those filter settings that we are changing are not part of the hardware, they're all in the software. And we use this to look at the signal. So the important reason to understand and why I've separated them is that when we get an EEG, we are now only dealing with the software. That is why for technologies who are listening today, it's very important for you to have an understanding of this head box and the motherboard and this, because whatever is happening before over here, basically we have no control as EEG readers. That is the sort of thing that you have recorded. So what you have recorded using the electrodes, the head box, if you have not plugged it correctly, XYZ, whatever the reason, we can't do much about that recording. And that is why we can only play with what we see, but what we have actually has already been recorded. Okay, so this is my first poll question. I don't know if Mr. Qureshi, the poll is working or not. Otherwise, I can just, display it over here. So even if it is not, okay, there it is. Excellent. So if you guys can do the first question right now. So this is EG, which you've just seen. So the question says, is it polymorphic delta activity? Is it bifrontal muscle artifact? Or is it showing non-cerebral activity? Okay, 67% first said. All right, so that's fine. We will end the poll. Okay, there is a 50% final answer is 50% polymorphic and lock. Yes, we can lock it now, and 50% non-cerebral activity. Well, this is non-cerebral activity. Box, and they will be hanging in the air, and you can still record something. Was it what this activity? I have actually no idea. It may be just be radio frequency waves, or TV waves, or your telephone or your mobile reception waves. No idea. But basically this is how sometimes, because EG will pick up whatever activity is in the atmosphere, and that is just to show you that even when we are not connected, there's so much things happening around, and that is why it's very important that our recording is a very good technically, so that we show that we only record cerebral activity. Okay, so we go on to next one. Again, we see here high amplitude activity with some polyspike, cutting uh, over there. But when we look at over this part of the, oops, if I can, yes. When we look at over this part, we see that these phase reversal are very bizarre. And this phase reversal just tell us these are not physiological phase reversal. We can't explain the polarity of it. And again, these are the same electrodes. Somebody is just shaking them in their hand. They're not connected. So these are just two examples of how non-cerebral activity can sometimes look like cerebral activity. Again, we look at this sort of, we look at this EEG. If you look over here, we see these are, we can recognize these are, blinks and eye movement artifact. But over here, we see they're a bit bizarre. They're not phase reversing as they should. They should be having that phase reversal. And because here what has happened is that C3 and F3 have been crossed over. They've not been plugged in the right. And when you plug right, all of them look the same. So again, example of if you put in another example, which will come next. Again, over here, you see this sort of phase reverse. You see this sort of phase reversal. Again, bizarre phase reversal. Again, there is a C3, F3 mismatch. And when you put it correctly, you see that is the activity. So one thing is next is very important that when you make sure you put in one electrode, you trace it back and put in the right head box. You go back, place another electrode, trace it back, put in the right head. So these are all technical issues which we have to be aware of. Okay. So when we put the electrodes, we give our scalp a bit of a scrub. We don't want to pull off skin and remove blood, but there is dermis there, dry skin, we want to remove it so that our electrode has less impedance. And impedance is just like resistance, and we put the electrolyte paste in between so that it connects a good connection. Even our electrode is loose, the connectivity is there, and that sort of reduces the impedance as well. And when we're dealing with impedance, we also need to know what sort of electrodes we're using. So here, if I we have a different array of electrodes that we use. The most commonly ones are the silver chloride ones. And the reason we use them is that they give us the best sort of, reproducibility of a sort of a electrical or EEG signal. So when we give a pulse, sort of an, stimulus, we give a pulse through this sort of, like a calibration pulse. We see that these pairs are represented with the silver chloride. Now, it's two things to mention here. One is be careful what the impedance is. Now, you want to keep the impedance less than 10 kilo ohms, but ideally less than 5. But more important, what is important is that the impedance differences should not be more. So it's not like your half of your electrodes are around 2 to 4, kilo ohms, and the rest are around 10 kilo ohms. So the difference between may also cause impedance mismatch. And this is a very important thing to realize what impedance mismatch is. And we will discuss this further when we go to notch filters, how we remove that basically. But important second thing to remember is that if your electrode, which is blue chloride electrode, is shining like silver, then it means it needs chloriding. And you can do chloriding by putting them in a sodium chloride solution and passing a small DC current 1 to 5 millivolts, and sort of, and they become again brown. So they should be brown. So if you have some electrodes which are more brown and some are shiny, it means that the ones which are getting shiny like this one, they need to be chlorided. And that will give them the same degree of impedance. And that will also remove your electrode pop artifacts as well. So here is examples of electropop artifact. If your electrodes is not working, that is how it shows. Over here as well. So be careful, go back, look at this. This is not a spike, phase reversing, this is electrode artifact. Go back to that channel and sort of, put in more gel, sort of fix it properly so it doesn't occur. And again, you can have like a run of electrode or, pop artifacts, which will look like an electrical seizure. Although if you look closely, we don't see the usual buildup in frequency and amplitude. So this is again an electrode pop artifact appearing as a run. Coming to our second component, which is the differential amplifier. Whenever we put in record any neurophysiological signal or any electrophysiological signal, to be more precise, we are recording it as a difference of two potentials. So the way always we use two electrodes, which is an active and a reference, or input 1 or input 2, or whatever you want to call it, what happens is that you have this electrical activity, which is in the sort of ambience. So it is in the atmosphere or in the surrounding. And when you subject it to a differential amplifier, you are looking at that red sort of activity, which is your activity of interest. And when this activity, the blue one, which is in the ambience, which is there, goes into input 1 and input 2, it cancels out. And whatever is left is the difference in the from between the two. And what you see at the other side of your record is the amplified version of it and the difference of it. So what comes out is just the red bit, which was our interest activity. So within a different amplifier, we have a couple of amplifiers. We have a sort of a ground electrode there as well, which serves as the second input in both of them. But this is the basic thing to understand. So what we want is it should cancel out activities which are same or common, which have common frequencies, voltages, and polarities. So this is how a differential amplifier works, and it gives us the difference between the potential activity between 1 point and 2 points. And this sort of rule applies to all neurophysiological recordings, just not EEG. Now, once we have gone through the differential amplifier, we have looked at the activity, we have seen that it is become, it is the difference what we want to record. Now we are looking at it over, if you look at this first diagram, it's what we call the analog signal. Now going back to my training in neurophysiology in the AQ days, we used to have two portable machines, and they used to be dragged around for portable sort of, old machines with pens. And there is where the analog sort of, machine comes in, that where what you record is with the pen. So this is like recorded once and you cannot change it. And you cannot, but what happened when digital machines came? How do we convert that analog signal, which is coming directly from the brain, into something digital? So when we want to capture something, we thought we should look at it, how it looks in terms of its amplitude and in terms of frequency. So the two things that we need to consider is amplitude resolution, how the amplitude should be replicated and stored digitally, and how the frequency should be stored. So here, when we look at it, what we did is that we thought that, okay, let us represent it and divide this whole amplitude from 0 to 10 millivolts voltage into four parts. And we use the binary system to use this. And we can say that in 2-bit binary digital representation, we can represent this in four steps. So in this binary combinations, if you know a bit of binary numbers, they can be on 0, 0, 0, 1, 1, 0, 1, 1. And with this sort of four steps of representation, we can look at a signal which is 10 millivolts in four steps like this. But when we look at it in 3 bits, we take sort of not 2:3, it's 8 steps. So you can see our 8-step signal, which is defined over here. It is looking the same, but not exactly the same. Why? Because it is missing the peaks. It is missing because it's becoming boxy. It's very boxy. It is not actual the right. So it means that we don't have enough steps to represent it. So we increase it to 5-bit, and then we see that this is a better representation, which is this one. This is 4-bit. And here we can see that the analog signal matches almost the digital signal. And here it's almost the same representation. So this is how we represent the amplitude in terms of its digital representation. So if you look at 12, now it comes to the frequency. Now just bear with me briefly on this. So here what we are looking at a span of 1 second recording, and we see that this waveform is of one frequency, 1 hertz, okay, like this. And we see that it's very well represented because the analog frequency we recorded was 1 hertz, and we digitalize it into 1 hertz as well. And while our sampling rate, please note here, is 20. So we're taking 20 points on the waveform to look at it, okay. Now we jump to 3. The analog frequency, which is a smoother round, waveform behind this dotted waveform, is 3, and the digitalized frequency is also 3. But we can see that it is getting nooks and corners in it. It's not as smooth as the previous one. And our sampling rate remains 20. We go down further, and here we make it 8. Still the frequency matches, but we see the shape is going out. When we go to 10, which is exactly half of our sampling rate, we see there's an exact match. But when we go to 14, now this is important step. Please just pay some attention here. Our analog signal, which is this smooth one, is 14 hertz. So we have 14 peaks over here in 1 second. Whereas when we look at our digital one, I'm going to make it red, is this one, the dots. So these are still picking 20 dots because sampling rate is 20. But look at how many peaks we are getting. We're only getting 6 peaks. So now the frequency is not matching our real frequency, which was 14. And this is what has happened, is that, when you call somebody by a separate name, so somebody's name is John, you call them Joe, we say, oh, his alias. तो उसका वो जो एक नहीं होता घर वाला नाम एक alias बन जाता है. That is what alias is. And this means that हमने उसका नाम distort कर दिया, बदल दिया, John से Joe कर दिया. ठीक है? And this is what is happening over here. So this distortion of the digitalized form and is representing the original form is known as aliasing. And this is happening because हमारी frequency जो थी
वो 14 हो गई थी, रेट हमारा 20 था. सो व्हाट वी नीड कि जो एनालॉग फ्रीक्वेंसी है उसकी जो सैम्पलिंग रेट है वो उसका डबल से भी ज्यादा हो. If I can write double here. Okay. So if I, because 14 is not, 20 is not double of that, that is what happens. And when we go further up, we see that it's even distortion is more, actually is 18 and we are only digitalizing 2. So this is all about that this is the frequency which is we call the Nyquist frequency, and it should be above double the sampling rate. So if you can understand that, that would be a big sort of a goal for me today, because that is a very basic important concept, and it comes in your EEG exams as well, boards. And this is what happens if you don't have the enough rate, we don't look at the picture. So it's like, we missing out on rates which are 200. We have these small sharps and spikes. We are missing out if the rate is less than that. So the recommendation is that we should sample at 256 sample rate from the ACNS, and we should use 6-bit of this is too important thing to remember, 6-bit of amplitude representation. So again, apologies to those people who may find this very dry, but this is technical stuff, so it has to be technical. I've got no other way to make it more sort of charming. Okay, now we go to the last part of our talk, which will be filters. And now look, when we do filtering, let's make a concept what filter is. Filter is that you put something in and you get something out. It's just filtering. घर में पानी का filter होता है, दूसरे filter होता है, ये भी उसी तरह का filter है. So what is happening over here on this side, we have different frequencies, and this side we seeing how much amplification of the output, what activity we are looking at. Okay. So if I engage a filter of low frequency of 1 hertz, so you can see this is 1 hertz over here, and I put a 1 hertz filter. When I look at a 1 hertz filter, I see that the frequency at 1 hertz has been coming out only 70%. 30% has been attenuated. यानी 30% जो है ना वो attenuate होके खत्म हो गई, filter हो गई. 70% नजर आ रही है. Okay. It's not like 1 hertz frequency थी तो वो पूरी की पूरी cut हो गई. It doesn't happen that way. Okay. So when I look at frequencies below, I see that they are even less. So 0.1 hertz frequency तो बिल्कुल भी नजर नहीं आ रही है. ये इस line पे है ही नहीं. Start ही हो रहा है 0.5 hertz से or something. And then when I go further, I see like 3-2 hertz की frequency भी थोड़ी सी कट हुई हुई है, क्योंकि ये पूरा 100% नहीं आ रहा है graph. So I can divide this graph into 3 parts. This is the attenuation. So first part is frequencies. When I put a 1 hertz filter, less than 0.1 hertz are totally no signal there, totally gone. Okay. Between 0.5 hertz to maybe around 5 hertz, I see that the presentation is there, but it is on a curve. So it's not like exact cutoff. Some are 1 hertz is it's only 70% and 30% cutoff. Others maybe 80%, 90%. Until above 5 hertz, I get all the faster frequencies, 10 hertz and above are going freely. So the same filter, I can name it a high pass filter. So it's a low frequency filter, but it is allowing higher frequencies to pass. So we can call it a high pass filter. You can see all these frequencies are passing clearly. So that's one thing to understand. Now, how do we construct it? You don't need to remember this, but look, when we have a waveform over here, which is showing both fast frequencies and slow frequencies, and this is what we're recording. Over here, it's an AC current, and it has some sort of fast activity and some slow activity. And that is what our EEG is. EEG has slow and fast activities. So what we do is that we take what we call a capacitor, we put it here, and we take a resistor and put it here. Okay. And capacitor is like a brick wall. When the lower frequencies hit there, they charge it and they stop charging it and they stop there. So, but for the high frequency, act like AC currents. AC current क्या होता है? Alternating current. वो क्या करता है? Charge discharge करता है. तो वो flow कर जाता है capacitor के through. लेकिन smaller frequency को capacitor रोक देता है. और अब हमने यहाँ पे अपना वो लगाया हुआ differential amplifier. वो यहाँ का और यहाँ का difference देख रहा है. तो जब हाई फ्रीक्वेंसी फिल्टर्स यहाँ पर आएगी, उसको यहाँ रजिस्टर लगा दिया रोकने के लिए, सारी की सारी यहाँ से चली गई बाहर, तो ये इनपुट उसकी पूरी बाहर आ गई आउटपुट के अंदर. ओके, सो इफ यू अंडरस्टैंड जस्ट कि कैपेसिटर ने रोक दी लो फ्रीक्वेंसीज और हाई फ्रीक्वेंसीज निकल गई, और वी कैन सी देम ओवर हियर. सो दिस इज हाउ वी कैन कंस्ट्रक्ट अ filter, a low frequency filter in our machine. अब इन सब चीजों का फायदा क्या हो? That is more important. Coming to the clinical EEG. Look at its EEG. It's a nice EEG, but I don't like these waves and channels going into each other. So there is a bit of mixing of waves and channels, and there is what we call very slow sort of wave artifacts here. And these are basically sweat artifacts. Now look at my low frequency filter up on the top. It's at 1 hertz. So I'm allowing a lot of low frequency filters in. So what I do, I change it to 5 hertz. When I've changed it to 5 hertz, it means it is removing a lot of slower frequencies, and those slower frequencies out, and now I can see my channels clearly in a straight line, and I can easily read the EEG. So you know where to use, where you have excessive sort of, slow activity, which is artifactual, you can remove it by changing your low frequency filter, and that's how the EEG will becomes more nice and clean. And all these filters I'm talking about, we are part of the software. We can do them after the recording. Now look at over this. Here we see a bit of, over the left temporal region, we see a bit of activity, which may look a bit asymmetric, but it doesn't come out very well. And here our low frequency filter is at 1.6 hertz. And we can see that there is an MRI correlation of this lesion over there in the left temporal lobe. But when I change these filters to 0.5 hertz, here I'm allowing more slow frequencies to come in so that my focal slowing becomes more prominent. So here what I did not remove slow frequency, I added them more. I let them in because I want to see that sort of, potential sort of asymmetry so that I can say, yes, my EEG matches the sort of MRI findings. And if I increase it even further, I see all that slowing is gone. So you can see if you play around with the filters, how you can make your EEG look normal and all that slowing that we were seeing is gone. So if I see this EEG and I see this MRI, I'll go and look at my filters. And if my filter is set at 5 hertz, I will change it to 0.5 hertz and I will report this, that yes, the EEG did show focal abnormality, which correlates with the MRI findings. So that is how you play with the filters when you're reporting EEG. Another use of EEG, low frequency filters, you have a lot of slow frequencies here. Where the aesthetics are, you may see some spikes, but they're not very clear. So if you change it from low frequency from 1 to 10 hertz, all that slow activity is gone and you can clearly appreciate the spikes. So if you have attenuated spikes because of slow activity, you can sort of increase your low frequency filter to remove the slow activity and see the spike better. Okay, we coming to the high frequency filter. Here, the same rule applies. Okay, now what we have done, we have put the filter at 70 hertz because this is 100 hertz. This is where we've engaged a 70 hertz filter, which is the high frequency filter. And if I sort of, again, we see that there is an attenuation of 30% of the activity and only 70% passes through. Same rule applies. The only difference here is that above 100 hertz, no activity is seen. So 70 hertz, we see 70% of activity. At 100 hertz, we see no activity. Okay. Whereas between around 10 to 70 hertz, we see a diminished signal, which is going on a curve, just as the low frequency filter was. And whereas all frequencies below 10 hertz are passing through, and we also call it a low pass filter. And we can replace the resistor and the capacitor and make it a high frequency filter. How we can do that is that when the high frequencies pass over here, they get engaged within the capacitor, and the difference between the 2 points of our differential amplifier is the same. That is why they cancel out. Whereas a low frequency filter sees the capacitor as a brick wall and it avoids it and goes through, and we can only see the slow frequencies, the faster frequencies are a bit cancelled out. So what does it do? Over here, if you look at over here, we see that there is a bit of slowing, but it is marked or masked by muscle artifact. So our routine high frequency filter at 70, we change it to 35. So what it has done, it has taken the faster frequency of the muscle artifact, and now we can see underneath focal slowing. So that is one use of your high frequency filter when you change it. Okay, now we see over here another sort of an EEG epoch, and this is a poll question. I think this is the second question. If you can put it up again. This was the second part which was shown in the first. I can even put it here. So, are these sleep spindles? Is this by temporal interictal spikes or are these normal findings? Can you reshare the poll again, or we can just make our own answers if the poll is not coming up? Okay. Question number 2. स्लिप स्पिंडल्स कौन समझ रहे हैं? स्लिप स्पिंडल्स हैं ये, बाय टेम्पोरल इंटरनल स्पाइक्स भी हैं इसमें, नॉर्मल फाइंडिंग्स, ओके, वेल डन सो फार। बाय टेम्पोरल स्पाइक्स हैं, अच्छा स्लिप स्पिंडल्स भी हैं, डन हो जाए तो हम इसको लॉक करें।
डॉक्टर सज्जाद,
जी जी,
आप एंड कर रहे हैं या
हाँ बस
अभी
5
तक?
मिनट्स में हो जाएगी,
ठीक।
ओके। Okay, so we will end the poll. Majority things which is correct because it is normal finding, and again it's normal finding because if you look at it, this is what the real EEG was before. So this was the EEG, but whenever you see a filter setting, अगर जिसने नोट किया ऊपर 15 हर्ट्ज लिखा हुआ था, इस फिल्टर सेटिंग में कभी भी कोई स्पाइक नजर आए तो उसको कभी ना माने, उसको जाके दोबारा 70 पे करें, वो मसल निकलेगा। दिस इज द होल मेन कॉन्सेप्ट हाई फिल्टर के ऊपर रिकॉर्ड करने में। ईजी बहुत प्यारा लगता है, जो ईजी पढ़ रहे होते हैं उनको भी बहुत अच्छा लगता है, जबरदस्त रिकॉर्डिंग की है, कोई मसल नहीं है। लेकिन 15 हर्ट्ज के फिल्टर के ऊपर अगर आपको कोई स्पाइक नजर आ रही है तो दिस इज टेक होम मैसेज कि दिस इज अ मसल आर्टिफैक्ट, इसको आप कोड करेंगे रॉन्ग। Okay, so notch filters again, देखिए what had happened was our we had two electrodes, हमने वहां पे impedance poor connection था, black हो गया ये वाला, यहाँ पे ज्यादा artifact आ गया है। अब ये mismatch जो है ना वो बराबर नहीं हो रहा है और contamination बाहर आ रही है, और उसके बाद that is the reason where our high impedance in one electrode will let the it become leaky to the surrounding 60 hertz or 50 hertz artifact, and it does not cancel out properly. And that is why we engage a filter which is only looking at the 60 hertz. It removes 59 to 61 hertz artifacts, and we get a clean signal. So this is contaminated with a lot of 60 hertz artifact. After we apply the notch filter, we get this. So it makes it clear. But please, पहले अप्लाई करने से नॉच फिल्टर लगा के कभी रिकॉर्डिंग ना करें, because that you will miss out on these frequencies which are only 60 hertz if it is a spike or some other fast activity. Always do all other means कि अपने electrodes को सही करें, अपनी cables management करें, plug your machine into a remote socket if possible, whatever measures you can do, you use those. So conclusions, from electrode side, important is that your silver electrode electrodes are maintained properly. You don't have impedance mismatch. We saw the function of differential amplifier, and we know that it's a relative signal, and we need to again look at the electrode and the channels are in the proper sockets. Important thing for MCQs who are doing average boards for EEG is the frequency sampling rate is 256 and amplitude resolution is 16-bit numbers. And then we spoke about filters. Important thing कि focal slowing को अगर attenuate करना, ज़्यादा उजागर करना है, prominent करना है, तो low frequencies filter कम कर दें, और अगर 70 हर्ट्ज फिल्टर है उसके जो हाई फ्रिक्वेंसी फिल्टर्स हैं वो हम 70 हर्ट्ज पे रखते हैं। उसमें इंपॉर्टेंट चीज जो लास्ट मेरा मैसेज था कि अगर आपको स्पाइक्स नजर आ रही हैं, बी श्योर कि आपका हाई फ्रिक्वेंसी फिल्टर बहुत लो उस पे नंबर पे नहीं है, बिकॉज दैट में बी मास्किंग some muscle artifacts. So I will stop there and thank you.